Magnificent old trees like this jarrah tree are a unique and irreplaceable feature of our landscape, and we can only imagine what it's seen in its lifetime. If you were to plant this tree from a seed today, it would need at least 200 to 500 years or more before it reaches this size. So large old trees are called habitat trees because of the role they play in providing food, shade and shelter for thousands of plants and animals. Old habitat trees can provide more food and nesting resources than younger trees. And even dead habitat trees are just as important for wildlife as live ones, especially when they have hollows like this or cracks and crevices that provide places where animals can live, breed or shelter. Habitat trees are legally protected where they provide suitable habitat for threatened native animals like black cockatoos. Matt Bonsack is a senior arborist with the Shire who's had over 20 years experience in managing and caring for trees. Matt's passionate about tree health and provides advice and assistance to the Shire and our residents. So Matt, what can people do to help habitat trees on their own property?
Probably the key factor is soil quality. We need to make sure that the soil is still providing nutrients and microorganisms into the soil, because as trees get older, like anything, we require TLC. And providing nutrients to the soil is going to help the health of the tree, help it flourish, help it grow. And we can do things like that by putting down layers of mulch. You know, as mulch deteriorates and degrades, it puts nutrients and microorganisms into the soil. And the soil, probably the first inch or so is the most important layer, because that's where we get our feeder roots, and we need to keep our feeder roots nice and healthy, because they absorb all the nutrients and all the moisture. So that's a very important factor, is keeping that probably inch of topsoil healthy and vibrant.
So what sort of things should we actually be looking at on the ground when we're looking at how healthy the soil is? Well,
we need to sort of look for a level of moisture content, really, because like we said, we need the moisture to break the nutrients down. So that's why it's important to keep this as much leaf litter and stuff as you can, because if you scrape through this leaf litter, as we get down, you can see that the moisture is in the soil. So this top, you put your hand on there, it's dry, and after we dig down through that level of leaf litter, it's nice and moist. And then you've got your feeder roots I was talking about before. All these feeder roots are the ones that absorb all your nutrients and all that sort of thing. So that's why keeping something over your soil that's going to break down is essential. And another thing we want to avoid is compaction. We don't want soil compaction, because what compaction does is it essentially starves all your roots, because roots need airflow as well as water, as well as nutrients. Airflow is very important, and if the soil is compacted, we don't have airflow, and therefore the tree will essentially suffocate. And that's even more important with an older tree and habitat tree. It's a lot more critical. Yeah, and just a simple way of doing that is getting a fork or a scarifier and just scratching up the soil all around the tree, and then the air can penetrate, and then when you put your layer of mulch down and all that sort of stuff, the water can penetrate through the soil a lot more easy, as well as the air, and that's also going to help the health of the tree.
What sort of things would cause compaction around the root zone?
Generally, it's vehicle movement. A lot of people parking their cars under trees. Also, foot traffic. If people are walking back and forth past the same route all the time, it's going to compact the soil. So even setting up a barrier where to exclude vehicles and exclude foot traffic is really going to be beneficial for the tree as well.
Are there any other things we can do that'll help trees?
There is. We can do things like planting shrubs, ground covers and things like that, like this one here. So essentially creating its own environment, because the more shrubs and bits of wood we've got on the ground, bits of timber, mulch, it all combines in unison to create its own environment, create the nutrients, create the microorganisms, bring the fungi in, bring the bugs and all that sort of stuff. They all work together to create a happy, healthy environment for these habitat trees.
Well, thanks, Matt. That was fantastic.
That's all right, Tracy. No worries. Always happy to talk about trees.
Great. Well, now we're going to go and meet Simon Cherriman, who's going to tell us all about the importance of hollows in habitat trees. Simon Cherriman is an environmental scientist, filmmaker and author who's passionate about West Australian birds and wildlife. Simon has spent much of his life amongst the treetops in the Perth Hills, studying our native birds and the tree hollows they use for nesting. Simon has also spent years experimenting to refine nest box designs that are suited to local birds and wildlife. Well, hi Simon, what are you doing hanging around here?
Hi Tracy, I've been up this tree checking a nesting box.
And did you find anything inside?
Not this time, but there is evidence that's been used before, which is great.
Well, that's fantastic. But let me ask this question. Why did you put it up there in the first place?
Well, we're trying to turn trees like this one, Tracy, that are younger into old habitat trees. But there's a fantastic habitat tree over here. Why don't we go and have a closer look to learn more?
So Simon, does this tree have a nest box in it?
This doesn't have a nest box, Tracy, but this is the sort of tree that is old enough to have natural hollows.
So natural hollows, why are they important?
Natural tree hollows are so important for a whole range of species that depend on them for nesting and for roosting. They can't build their own house basically, so they're looking for an apartment block.
Wow, so what sort of animals need a hollow?
A whole range of species that live in southwest WA, from things like parrots, small reptiles, right up to the larger species like black cockatoos, owls, ducks. There's about 40 species in southwest WA that need a hollow-bearing habitat tree for their home.
Simon, this tree looks really old. Is it a habitat tree?
Yes, it is a habitat tree, Tracy. This one is probably at least 200 years old, but trees don't need to be this big and this old to be habitat trees. Essentially, a tree is a habitat tree from the first time it grows, but trees like this that are really old are particularly precious habitat trees.
Wow, I think we really need to look after these big trees then.
Definitely. We need to look after big, old, established habitat trees and also encourage the next generation of younger trees that are going to replace these when they fall over.
So Simon, what about smaller trees like this? Do they still have as much value as the larger habitat trees?
Definitely, Tracy, in a different way. So trees like this that are smaller, this one might only be 20 years old, they are going to be the replacement trees for the generation of old habitat trees we've currently got growing in the landscape. So it is really important people consider the value of them as the next generation.
So that's a really good point, Simon. So if you've only got a tree this size on your property, or a bunch of trees this size, we really should look after them just as much as we look after the big habitat trees.
Definitely, Tracy, there's no question. And trees like this make perfect installation sites for an artificial hollow like a nest box.
So Simon, if I have a habitat tree on my property that doesn't have hollows and I want to help those hollow dependent fauna, what sort of things could I do?
Well, Tracy, that's what I was doing when you arrived. I was checking a nesting box, and people can definitely help hollow-dependent species in their backyards by installing artificial tree hollows or nest boxes. That's a fantastic thing to do, both to help the hollow-dependent fauna and to become better custodians of the land.
So the next question, Simon, is, well, how do I know what sort of nest box to put in? Is that difficult, or is that a fairly easy thing to do?
It's pretty easy. You can basically follow, there's lots of information online. I've just published a book about tree hollows and hollow-dependent fauna. But essentially there's about 8 or 10 sizes and shapes and dimensions of nest boxes that people can install on trees in their property. And they work really well in the younger habitat trees that don't have hollows in them. And yeah, very, very easy to follow those tips online.
As you can see, there's a lot we can do to help our habitat trees. If you'd like more information, contact the Shire of Mundaring or visit our website.